cocky police officer smirks in court, confident he's about to put a black woman behind bars. What he doesn't know, she's no ordinary defendant. She's a Secret Service operative, and this trial is about to flip against him. When she pulls out her badge and unveils shocking evidence, the courtroom gasps. He thought he was in control, but he just walked into a federal sting. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension, but Officer Gregson didn't seem to notice. He sat in the witness stand, his back straight, a smug smirk curling at the corners of his mouth. He had been in courtrooms like this plenty of times before, and every single time it played out the same way. The defendant, especially when they looked like her, never stood a chance. Across the room, seated at the defense table, Maya Carter remained composed. She was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She watched Gregson with a quiet intensity, her dark eyes locked onto his every movement, but she never reacted, never flinched, never showed any sign of distress. It was almost as if she wasn't the one on trial. Gregson found it amusing. The case was open and shut as far as he was concerned. She had been caught at the scene, and his testimony would ensure her conviction. That was all that mattered. What was she going to do? Argue? Cry? Plead for leniency? He'd seen it all before. It never changed. In his world, the badge and the uniform meant his word was gospel. The people on the jury would believe him. They always did. The judge cleared his throat, shifting the room's attention back to the proceedings. We will now hear the testimony of Officer Gregson, who was present at the time of the arrest. Gregson sat forward, adjusting the microphone in front of him, his smirk widening. He glanced over at Maya again, as if expecting her to shrink under the weight of his words. But she didn't. She just stared, as if she could see straight through him. The look in her eyes unsettled him for just a moment, but he quickly pushed it aside. The defendant was found at the location in question, Gregson began, his voice steady, confident. She fit the description of a suspect we had been tracking, and when I approached, she acted suspiciously. She resisted arrest, which required me to use force to subdue her. We later found evidence linking her to the crime. Maya said nothing. She didn't move. Her lawyer, seated beside her, listened intently, waiting for his turn to speak. But Maya, she didn't even blink. She simply sat there, her hands folded neatly in front of her, completely unaffected by Gregson's words. That irked him. Most people in her position would be nervous, shifting in their seats, whispering to their lawyers. But not her. She didn't react the way she was supposed to. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. Thank you, Officer Gregson. No further questions at this time. Gregson leaned back, exhaling slightly. Easy. Then the defense attorney stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Maya Carter to the stand. Gregson frowned. This wasn't supposed to happen. Defendants rarely testified in their own defense, especially when the case seemed airtight. And yet, as Maya rose from her seat and walked toward the witness stand with measured, confident steps, Gregson felt an uneasy shift in the air, like a storm was coming. A few weeks earlier, it had been just another night on patrol for Officer Gregson and his partner, Officer Mills. They were stationed in a neighborhood they often referred to as high risk, though what that really meant was that they didn't like the people who lived there. It was an unspoken rule. Certain cars, certain faces, certain attitudes always warranted extra attention. And tonight, Gregson's attention was on a sleek black SUV that had just rolled to a stop at a red light. He tapped Mills on the arm. Look at that. Nice ride for this part of town, don't you think? Mills chuckled. Yeah, let's see who's behind the wheel. Flipping on the squad car's lights, they pulled in behind the SUV. It took only a second before the driver complied, pulling over to the curb with a smooth, practiced motion. No hesitation, no panic, just calm. Gregson stepped out first, adjusting his belt as he approached the driver's side window. When it rolled down, he was met with the sight of a black woman, her hands already resting on the steering wheel in plain view. She wore a fitted black blazer over a crisp white blouse, and her posture was straight, almost military-like. But what caught Gregson's attention more than her appearance was her eyes, sharp, assessing, controlled. License and registration, Gregson said, flashing a condescending smile. You were driving a little too nice for this neighborhood. The woman said nothing as she reached into her glove compartment and retrieved her documents. She moved with precision, no wasted motion, as if she had done this 100 times before. Gregson glanced at the license. Maya Carter, he read aloud. You in a hurry tonight, Miss Carter? No, she replied evenly. Her voice was calm, smooth, completely devoid of fear or nervousness. That irritated him. He was used to people fumbling, making excuses, explaining themselves before he even asked a question. She just sat there, watching him. You live around here? Gregson asked, though he already knew the answer. The address on her license was in a high-end part of the city, nowhere near this neighborhood. I was passing through, she said simply. Gregson's smirk widened. Passing through, huh? You mind if we take a look inside your vehicle? Maya didn't flinch. Frat, do you have probable cause? Gregson's smirk faltered slightly. Most people didn't ask that. They either complied immediately, too afraid to say no, or they got defensive. But she just asked the question like she already knew the answer. Look, Miss Carter, he said, leaning on the edge of her window. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. Up to you. For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips, but it wasn't friendly. It was knowing. I think the law already decided how easy this is supposed to be, she said. Gregson felt a flicker of irritation, but before he could say anything, Mills called out from the squad car. We're good. Let her go. Gregson hesitated for a second longer, narrowing his eyes at her. He didn't like this. Something about her didn't sit right, but he had nothing on her. You're free to go, he said, stepping back. Maya nodded, rolling up her window. As she pulled away, Gregson watched her disappear down the street, a strange feeling settling in his chest. He had no idea that the woman he had just tried to intimidate was no ordinary driver. She was a highly trained Secret Service operative. And soon their paths would cross again in a way he never expected. The courtroom fell silent as the defense attorney adjusted his tie and stepped forward. Your Honor, the defense calls Maya Carter to the stand. Officer Gregson frowned, shifting in his seat. This wasn't supposed to happen. Defendants rarely took the stand in their own defense, especially not when the case seemed airtight. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, still wearing the same smug smirk he'd had since the trial began. Whatever she thought she was going to say, it wouldn't matter. The jury trusted him, the decorated officer, over her. Just another suspect trying to squirm her way out of justice. Maya Carter, still poised and composed, rose from her seat. She buttoned her navy blue blazer with an effortless precision before walking toward the witness stand, her heels clicking against the polished courtroom floor. She moved with purpose, her steps steady, unshaken. Gregson watched her, trying to read her expression, but she gave nothing away. No fear, no desperation, no nervous glances toward the jury. It was unnerving. The bailiff stepped forward. Raise your right hand, he instructed. Maya did as told. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do, she said without hesitation. She took her seat, crossing her legs, placing her hands neatly on her lap. The defense attorney stepped forward. Miss Carter, he began, Officer Gregson testified that you resisted arrest on the night in question. Is that true? Maya tilted her head slightly. No, that is not true. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Gregson narrowed his eyes. Of course, she was going to deny it. They all did. The attorney nodded. Can you describe what happened in your own words? Maya took a breath, then spoke with measured control. I was stopped by Officer Gregson and his partner without cause. I complied with their requests. I handed over my license and registration. I remained calm and respectful, yet Officer Gregson treated me with unwarranted hostility. Gregson scoffed loudly, but the judge shot him a warning glance. Did Officer Gregson have probable cause to search your vehicle? The attorney asked. No, Maya said. And when I refused the unlawful search, he made it clear that compliance would determine whether I was going to have a good night or a bad night. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. The defense attorney paced slightly. Miss Carter, why do you think Officer Gregson believed he could treat you this way? Maya's eyes locked onto Gregson's. Because he assumed I was powerless. He assumed I had no authority, no resources, no way to fight back. Gregson scoffed again, but this time there was a flicker of something else. Uncertainty. The defense attorney nodded. And do you have any evidence to support your claims? Maya's lips curled into the faintest smile. Yes, she said. I do. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, placing it gently on the witness stand. The room went still as the gold badge of a Secret Service agent gleamed under the courtroom lights. The moment Maya Carter placed the gleaming gold badge on the stand, the entire courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The judge leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. The prosecutor's face paled. Even the jury members exchanged confused glances, murmuring among themselves. But the most dramatic reaction came from Officer Gregson. His smirk vanished. His jaw tightened, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Maya lifted her gaze, her eyes locking onto his. She had seen men like him before, men who wore their authority like armor, believing it made them untouchable. But that was the problem with unchecked power. It made them sloppy, overconfident. And Gregson had no idea who he had been up against. The defense attorney cleared his throat, allowing the tension in the room to settle before speaking. Miss Carter, could you please explain to the court the significance of this badge? Maya picked up the badge between her fingers, turning it slowly so the jurors could see the words engraved on it. United States Secret Service. I am a federal agent with the United States Secret Service, she said, her voice unwavering. I was in the middle of an undercover operation the night Officer Gregson detained me. A stunned murmur rippled through the crowd. Gregson stiffened. That's not possible, he muttered under his breath. Maya continued, unbothered by his reaction. For months, my team had been investigating reports of corruption within the local police department, specifically officers who were engaging in racial profiling, fabricating charges, and abusing their authority. That investigation led me directly to Officer Gregson. The courtroom gasped. Gregson's face turned red. This is ridiculous, he barked. She's lying. The judge banged the gavel. Officer Gregson, you will remain silent unless addressed. Gregson clenched his fists, but said nothing. The defense attorney pressed forward. Miss Carter, do you have any proof to back up these claims? Maya nodded. Yes. My vehicle was equipped with surveillance equipment. Everything that happened during my encounter with Officer Gregson was recorded, audio and video. Gregson's face drained of color. The attorney turned toward the judge. Your Honor, we have submitted this footage as evidence. I request that it be played for the jury. The judge gave a curt nod. Proceed. A screen lowered in the courtroom. The footage began to play. Gregson's voice echoed through the speakers, arrogant and dismissive. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. Up to you. The video showed him leaning against Maya's car window, smirking, taunting her. It showed him reaching for his handcuffs before she had even refused the search. It caught every single detail. The power trip, the abuse, the moment he realized he had no real reason to detain her. The jury watched in stunned silence. Gregson shifted in his seat, sweat forming on his brow. Maya sat back, watching him now. This was the moment he realized the truth. He had walked straight into a federal sting operation. The weight of the evidence hung heavy in the courtroom. The damning video played in front of the jury, capturing every smug word, every unjustified action. It was all there. Gregson's abuse of power, his attempt to intimidate Maya, and his blatant disregard for the law. The room was silent, except for the echo of his own voice through the speakers. Gregson sat frozen in his seat, his once confident smirk completely erased. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly his knuckles turned white. He could feel the eyes of the jury boring into him, their expressions shifting from neutral to disgusted. The video ended. The screen went black. The defense attorney turned back to the judge. Your Honor, given this new evidence, we request that all charges against my client be dismissed immediately. Furthermore, I believe there is enough cause to open an investigation into Officer Gregson's conduct. The prosecutor, who had been so self-assured before, now fumbled through his papers, clearly thrown off. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, the state was not made aware of this footage prior to trial. We request a recess to. The judge held up a hand, silencing him. He turned his gaze toward Maya. Agent Carter, do you have reason to believe that Officer Gregson's behavior on the night in question was not an isolated incident? Maya didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor. My team has been compiling evidence on Officer Gregson and several others within his precinct. This is not the first time he has abused his authority. The judge exhaled slowly, then turned his attention to Gregson. Officer Gregson, stand up. Gregson hesitated, as if refusing would somehow make this all go away. But when the bailiff stepped toward him, he reluctantly rose to his feet, his face now a shade paler. The judge's voice was firm. This court finds that there is sufficient evidence to dismiss all charges against Agent Carter. Furthermore, in light of the video evidence presented today, Officer Gregson, you are hereby placed under investigation for misconduct, unlawful detention, and abuse of power. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Gregson opened his mouth, his arrogance flaring up for one final attempt at control. You can't do this. This is a setup. She played me. Maya stood, adjusting the button on her blazer. She walked toward Gregson, stopping just short of him, her expression unreadable. No, Officer Gregson, she said calmly. You played yourself. The bailiff moved in, reaching for his handcuffs. Turn around. Gregson flinched. He had put these cuffs on countless people before, always with that same smirk on his face. Now it was his turn. Click. The cuffs locked around his wrists. As Gregson was led away, Maya turned and gathered her belongings. She had done what she came to do. Justice had been served. As she walked out of the courtroom, the whispers of the spectators followed her, but she didn't acknowledge them. She didn't need to. This mission was over, and she was already prepared for the next one.